The European Critical Raw Materials Act is a piece of legislation that came into force in 2024, really looking at classifying what are strategic and critical raw materials for the European Union. It's not just looking at the importance of these materials for European manufacturing, but it's also quite forward-looking in projecting what elements, what metals, minerals are going to be important for the green energy transition going forward. And so the CRMA is really interlinked with a broader European industrialisation strategy for a green transition. If we look at the CRMA, it has a target of at least 10% of minerals used should be mined within the common market. It aims for an ambitious 40% of minerals used should be processed and 15% should be recycled within the European Union. The CRMA creates opportunities for businesses by lowering barriers to entry, by streamlining some of the bureaucratic processes, and by classifying certain projects as strategic projects. It is also then a responsibility of members to support where they can the advancement of that project through whichever means that they have available. This is also a bit separate to what's going on in the UK with the critical minerals strategy, in that within the UK you have important elements of the mining industry that you don't have within the European Union, such as the London Metals Exchange. But at the same time, within the European Union, considerably larger levels of manufacturing and greater industrial demand for some of those metals and minerals in a way that the UK doesn't. The Critical Raw Materials Act and the Critical Minerals Strategy from the EU and the UK respectively are primarily domestic acts. They're looking at increasing processing. One of the challenges that is faced in both of those jurisdictions are social pressures and space, and in the environmental challenges that exist within those spaces. And so one of the requirements that they're going to have is significant imports, particularly if ambitions for the green transition are going to be met. Many of these sit within Africa, and so there's a significant opportunity for African producers to tap into and be the providers for the required metals and minerals that are being demanded. One of the challenges that sits within that is the way in which the CRMA actually is going to enact some of this support. So within the European Union, it's much easier for things like preferential treatment on products, streamlining bureaucratic processes and licensing. Much easier to do that within the European Union than it is outside. China is the world's largest processor of critical minerals, and that's something that the EU strategy is trying to support alternatives towards. We have seen in the past examples of where China, as a dominant producer, has restricted the export of minerals, particularly to other Asian countries who are important manufacturers. But we've also seen more recent closing of and restrictions around exports of critical minerals out of China. The other challenge is, of course, the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and how that has impacted supply chains. Also, the US's Inflation Reduction Act, which provides significant subsidies for green industries. And so the expectation of America's taking a greater share of the minerals out there is also partly what has caused the European Union to address what they see as forthcoming supply-side challenges. The Inflation Reduction Act in the US is predominantly a set of subsidies, and significant subsidies on offer for producers and processors. Now, particularly within the European Union and particularly in the UK, the same level of finance simply isn't available to be able to offer the scale of market tilting subsidies that are available in the US. Furthermore, China's approach has been very state-led, where you have state companies and state-owned entities linked with the state itself who can provide cover and political support for market entry. The EU and UK approach has been far more private sector focused, but with the support of both European Union or UK political engagement and involvement. And it's also important to note that both of those, both the European Union and the UK, are members of the Mineral Security Partnership, which is a fledgling organization between broadly G7 partners looking at upscaling production of and processing of critical minerals that can be available for the partnerships within the MSP. The EU CRMA defines criticality broadly around the economic importance of certain metals and minerals for the green energy transition and future energy demand and energy security, where African countries are defining criticality based around the economic importance and the developmental opportunities of those metals and minerals. Then you start to see a very different set of products being defined as critical compared to within the European Union. So for example, South Africa sees coal as critical because it is over 85% of its energy is derived from coal-fired power stations. Outside of South Africa, you also see things like gold, diamonds being included on these critical mineral lists because these are really important for national economic development. The European Union has created critical mineral partnerships with several African countries, including Namibia, DRC, Zambia. It's also supporting the increase of production through supporting infrastructure projects, as well as activities and initiatives that are taking place around infrastructure projects. And finally, the EU does have an important role to play in supporting traceability schemes and responsible sourcing and enforcing ESG criteria. We've already seen a number of partnerships being enacted, including with Namibia, with Zambia, with DRC, to facilitate investment, to crowd in private sector investment, and to open up infrastructure routes to support development of African countries in a win-win basis where African countries are benefiting and so are European consumers. And so that win-win is something that's really central to the relationship between Europe and African producers on the Critical Minerals Act and what it entails.